So, let's dive into a really powerful idea from the book, The System's View of Life. It basically argues that the reason we struggle with our biggest problems, things like climate change or economic meltdowns, is because we're looking at them all wrong. We're so focused on the individual pieces that we completely miss the big picture. And it all starts with this feeling that I think a lot of us have, right? You look at the world and it feels like all our major crises, the ecological ones, the financial ones, the social ones, are all tangled up together. Well, the short answer is they are. And the reason they're connected actually points to a huge flaw in how we've been taught to see everything. Okay, so here's the plan. We're going to start by looking at this fragmented worldview we all grew up with. Then we'll uncover the hidden patterns of connection that define every living thing. We'll see how those patterns have shaped evolution itself, and then we'll get to the heart of it, understanding why our biggest problems are really just one big crisis of perception. And finally, the good part. We'll look at how we can learn from nature to build a better way forward. All right, first stop, how we got here. For the last few hundred years, the most powerful way of thinking has been something called reductionism. It's a simple idea. If you want to understand something, you just take it apart and study the pieces. And look, it's gotten us pretty far, right? But it has this one huge blind spot. Because of that way of thinking, our whole society tends to lean towards one side of this table, what the book calls self-assertive values. We value competition more than cooperation. We're taught to analyze things by breaking them down. That's reductionism. Instead of seeing the whole, we love simple, linear cause and effect stories, and we totally miss the messy, nonlinear networks that are actually running the show. Here's a classic example. When Louis Pasteur discovered bacteria, it was a revolution. But it also led to this super simple germ theory. One germ causes one disease. Now, that was a massive step forward, don't get me wrong. But it completely ignored the bigger picture. It missed the fact that your health isn't just about avoiding a germ. It's an emergent property. It comes from the complex web of your diet, your environment, your stress levels, the whole system. And this idea, this breaking things down approach, it didn't just stay in science. It jumped right into economics. Adam Smith's whole model basically saw society as just a bunch of separate individuals. He had this idea that if every single person just acted in their own self-interest, some magical, invisible hand would sort it all out for the good of everyone. It's a nice, simple, linear story, but reality is just a little more complicated than that. So, if seeing the world as a collection of pieces is the problem, what's the alternative? Well, this is where things get really interesting. This brings us to the core of the book, the system's view of life. It's a total shift in perspective. It's about moving from seeing parts to seeing the whole, from looking at objects to understanding relationships. So here's the key takeaway. In any living system, the most important properties aren't found in the parts themselves. They're found in the relationships and the patterns between the parts. A living cell isn't just a sack of chemicals, right? And a rainforest isn't just a list of trees and animals. The life, the magic, it's all in the network. I mean, think about our own planet for a second. The Earth's climate isn't some simple machine you can tinker with. It's a living, breathing, self-regulating system. It keeps itself stable through this unbelievably complex web of feedback loops, like how carbon is constantly moving between the air, the oceans, and all living things. And get this is where it all connects. This tiny little organism, this microscopic alga, pulls carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere to build its beautiful little shell. Then, when it dies, it sinks to the bottom of the ocean, locking that carbon away. Trillions of these tiny creatures, all part of a network, are acting like a thermostat for the entire globe. From the microscopic to the planetary, it's all one system. So what happens when you apply this systems thinking to life itself? You realize that evolution isn't some straight line marching towards a goal. It's a creative, messy, sprawling network of connections. I mean, the story starts right at the beginning. You've probably heard of the Miller-Urey experiment. They basically bottled up the early Earth's atmosphere, simple gases, and zapped it with electricity to act like lightning. And what happened? The building blocks of life, amino acids, just started to form, all by themselves. It's a core property of networks. They want to organize. And from that simple, self-organizing chemical soup, you get this incredible branching web of life. It's not a ladder with us at the top. It's a story of constant diversification, of shared history, of connections that literally tie us to every other living thing on Earth.
And this completely reframes survival of the fittest, right? It's not just about the lone wolf. It's this beautiful dance between a few key things. You've got variation from random mutations, you've got adaptation to new environments, you've got natural selection, of course, but the systems view adds a crucial piece to the puzzle: cooperation, working together to strengthen the whole network.
Okay, so this is where it all comes together. This is the heart of the book's argument. Our biggest global problems, the climate crisis, the financial instability, they aren't actually separate technical problems. They're all symptoms of one single underlying issue, a crisis of perception. We are trying to solve 21st century network problems with a 17th century mechanical mindset, and it's not working.
Think back to the 2008 financial crisis. That wasn't just a few bad decisions, it was a total systems failure. You had people using these incredibly complex reductionist models to chop up mortgages and sell them off, creating a financial network so tangled that literally no one understood the risk. It wasn't one bad apple. The feedback loops in the system took over, and the whole thing just collapsed.
Now, let's apply that same systems thinking to our climate. The scientists have run the numbers. They've looked at the planetary system as a whole, and they've given us a budget. To have a decent shot at staying below 2 degrees Celsius of warming, the danger zone, we can only release about 565 more gigatons of CO2. Period. That's the hard limit of the system. Okay, so that's our budget, 565. Now, here's the reality. The amount of carbon that is already accounted for in the proven reserves of fossil fuel companies, the stuff they plan to dig up and sell, is 2,795 gigatons. That is 5 times our entire planet's safety budget, and it's already on their balance sheets as an asset.
And that leads us to this absolutely brutal and unavoidable conclusion, summed up perfectly here. The logic of our current economic system is on a direct collision course with the physical reality of our planet's living system. You can't have both. This is the crisis of perception.
So that's a lot. It sounds pretty bleak, right? But here's the hopeful turn. Recognizing the problem is the first step. The next step is to look for a better model. And where do we look? We look to the most successful, innovative, and sustainable enterprise in the history of the planet, life itself. For almost 4 billion years, nature has been perfecting the art of creating resilient, thriving communities.
And that idea is called ecological design. It's about being ecologically literate. It means we stop trying to dominate nature and instead start designing our cities, our businesses, and our technologies to work with the natural world's patterns and flows, not against them.
So how does that actually work? Well, one of the coolest models is called cradle to cradle. In nature, there's no such thing as waste, right? One organism's waste is another's food. Cradle to cradle copies that. You design products so that everything is either a biological nutrient, it can safely return to the soil and decompose, or a technical nutrient that can be recycled endlessly at high quality, never becoming trash. And you know what? This isn't just some far-off dream. It's actually happening right now in pockets all over the world. You see it in industrial symbiosis, where a bunch of factories work together so one's waste stream becomes another's raw material. You see it in ideas for tax shifting, making it cheaper to hire people and more expensive to pollute. And you see it every time a community group successfully pushes to replace a fossil fuel plant with renewables. These are all systemic solutions. They're changing the rules of the network itself.
So that brings us full circle. Our old, fragmented way of seeing the world literally built the one we have now, with all of its incredible successes and all of its terrifying crises. The system's view of life gives us a new way to see. And it leaves us with this really powerful and, I think, hopeful question. If we all start to truly see the world as a living network of connections, what kind of world could we create then?